September 19th, 1980, before dawn, a dark, empty highway cutting through the cotton fields of rural Arkansas. Then the silence breaks, not gradually, not with warning. The night sky simply ceases to exist, replaced in a single instant by a wall of pure white light, so absolute it burns the retinas of truck drivers on the interstate 3 miles away. The ground heaves. A column of fire erupts from the earth itself, and from the center of that roaring column, carried upward on a pillar of superheated gas, an object weighing nearly 9 tons clears the tree line and arcs into the night sky. It is a 9-megaton thermonuclear warhead, 600 times more destructive than the bomb that reduced Hiroshima to ash and shadow. And it has just been flung, unguided and uncontrolled, into the American countryside. To understand how the United States military accidentally launched its most powerful weapon at its own soil, we must go back 12 hours. We must go back to a single decision made by an exhausted 21-year-old airman holding a wrench in a concrete hole in the ground. September 18th, 1980. Hidden beneath the flat farmland of Damascus, Arkansas, population 600, is Launch Complex 374. From the road, it looks like any other fenced utility installation. A concrete pad, a chain link perimeter, no signage worth reading. But directly below the dirt, buried inside a reinforced concrete cylinder 9 stories deep, stands the Titan II intercontinental ballistic missile, 103 feet of cold precision. A machine conceived to carry death across 8,000 miles of open sky to the heart of the Soviet Union within 30 minutes of a single presidential phone call. The missile runs on 2 liquid propellants, Aerozine 50 as fuel, liquid nitrogen tetroxide as oxidizer. Both compounds are hypergolic. They ignite spontaneously on contact with each other, with no need for a spark or flame. They are also profoundly toxic. Inhale enough and your lungs dissolve from the inside. At 6:30 in the evening, a 2-man maintenance team arrives at the Damascus complex. Airman David Powell, 21, and Airman Jeffrey Plum, 20. Their assignment is almost insultingly simple. Check the pressure reading on the second stage oxidizer tank. A standard gauge check. They have done it before. They descend into the silo, resting at the very tip of the rocket. Behind a blunt re-entry cone, the color of chalk, is the W-53 nuclear warhead, the most destructive object ever built by human hands. Protocol is explicit. To remove the pressure cap, technicians are required to use an authorized torque wrench, a specialized tool calibrated to the exact specifications of the fastener. But the authorized wrench is stored in another section of the facility. Fetching it means 40 minutes of additional work. Powell makes a decision. He picks up a standard heavy-duty socket wrench and attaches a large 9-pound steel socket. He leans over the railing. He fits the socket to the bolt. He turns his wrist. Physics, indifferent to rank or intention, does what physics always does. The socket shifts. Powell feels it go. He grabs for it with his free hand, his fingers closing on nothing but air. The 9-pound steel socket drops. Below is 70 feet of vertical concrete shaft. The socket falls for nearly 3 full seconds. Both men watch it fall. Neither breathes. The socket strikes the steel thrust mount at the base of the silo with a sound like a rifle shot. It bounces, and in its ricocheting path, guided by nothing more than the geometry of the moment, it strikes the paper-thin aluminum skin of the first stage fuel tank. A sharp, wet tearing, the sound of pressurized metal giving way. A plume of white vapor erupts from the puncture wound, billowing upward through the silo in seconds. The fog is Aerozine 50, dispersing into an enclosed underground space at a rate the men's instruments cannot properly calculate. It is heavier than air. It will fill every corridor, every conduit, every gap beneath every blast door, and it will wait, patient as geology, for a single point of ignition. Powell and Plum do not wait. They run. The Underground Command Center for Launch Complex 374 is a reinforced concrete sphere suspended on shock absorbers 4 stories beneath the surface, designed to survive a direct Soviet nuclear strike. Tonight, that isolation is about to become a trap. Captain Mazerow, the duty commander, picks up the emergency phone. He hears Powell's voice, shaking, clipped, the voice of a young man who knows exactly how bad the situation is. The missile has been punctured. Raw Aerosine 50 is dispersing inside the silo. Mazzaro hits the klaxon. The control room floods with red emergency lighting. He grabs the direct line to Strategic Air Command headquarters in Omaha, Nebraska. The generals in Omaha want information, detailed information. They want to know the fuel tank pressure readings, the exact rate of vapor dispersal, the status of the exhaust systems. They want spreadsheets on a phone call while a nuclear weapon sits on top of a bomb. Hours pass, not minutes. Hours. Inside the control center, the Aerosine 50 vapor begins to migrate through the ventilation seals. The crew begins to smell something faint and sweet. Every man in that room knows what that scent means. They scramble for their emergency oxygen masks, strapping the rubber housings over their faces with the focused calm of people who have trained for exactly this moment and are now realizing that training and reality are not the same thing. The fuel pressure readings from the first stage tank are dropping. The Titan II is held upright by the internal pressure of its tanks. The thin aluminum skin cannot support the missile's weight without that internal support. As the fuel escapes, the walls will begin to deform. At some point, the missile will begin to buckle. And above the buckling missile, the W-53 warhead will begin to descend. The ventilation systems connecting the silo to the command sphere, designed with automatic chemical seal fail-safes, do not seal. The vapor, heavier than air, finds the conduits. It finds the gaps beneath the blast doors. It seeps through seals that have grown old and brittle in the Arkansas clay. 3 miles up the road from the complex gate, on a modest farm adjacent to the installation, a family sleeps peacefully through the night. They have lived adjacent to the installation for 15 years. They have never been told exactly what is inside it. They do not know that several stories below the field across the fence, an invisible chemical bomb is slowly reaching critical density, and the generals responsible for managing it are arguing on the phone about evacuation protocols. The aerosine vapor keeps rising. It fills every dark corner, every maintenance shaft, the narrow space behind every electrical panel. The concentration is approaching the threshold where a single arc of static electricity becomes indistinguishable from a detonation trigger. The missile is beginning to die. The thin metallic walls of the fuel tank are losing their structural rigidity. The framework holding the rocket in its cradle is beginning to bear weight it was not designed to carry alone. Above it all, in the darkened tip of the silo, the warhead waits with absolute indifference. Nebraska absorbs the information and continues to deliberate. The military's chain of command, engineered for the discipline of war, ceases when confronted with an accident it has no rehearsed procedure for. Every minute they debate, the pressure inside the silo climbs higher. At 2 a.m, the local base commander arrives at the surface of Launch Complex 374. The hazmat team is staged on the access road, suits on, instruments out, waiting. The area has been cordoned off. The base's public affairs office has already drafted a statement describing a routine fuel handling incident. The lies are already in place. The commander looks at his emergency response roster and makes 2 phone calls. Senior Airman David Livingston, 22 years old. Sergeant Jeff Kennedy, 24. Both are qualified hazardous materials specialists. They are ordered to suit up, descend into the gas-saturated silo, and manually open the exhaust dampers. Both men understand the assignment completely. Their suits will protect them from direct chemical contact. They will offer no protection whatsoever against a fuel-air detonation. They are, in the plainest terms, being ordered to walk inside a bomb. Livingston and Kennedy put on their suits. They check each other's seals. They pick up their flashlights. They push open the heavy steel blast doors and enter the dark. The beam of Livingston's flashlight dies against the fog 3 feet in front of his face. The vapor detectors they carry emit a continuous shriek within seconds of entering, pegged at maximum and staying there. The atmosphere is so saturated with fuel that it feels thick and heavy against their rubber suits. They move slowly. Their boots connect with the concrete floor with each careful step, generating the faint crackle of static electricity that neither of them allows himself to think about. Every junction box they pass, every light fixture, every length of aging rubber insulated wire represents a potential ignition point. The silo has been in service for nearly 20 years. Its electrical infrastructure is not new. The men breathe canned air and move in absolute silence, communicating only by touch and gesture through the fog. They reach the mechanical room, working entirely by touch and the narrow columns of their flashlights. They locate the exhaust system controls. The damper wheels are stiff, never fully exercised in an emergency configuration, and it takes the combined leverage of both men to force them open. The fans engage with a low building roar that vibrates through the concrete and into their boots. They look at each other through the scratched glass of their visors. They did the impossible. They stabilized the pressure. They saved the missile from collapsing, exhausted and sweating profusely inside their rubber suits. They turn around and walk back toward the surface. When they push open the outer blast doors and step into the Arkansas night, the contrast is staggering. Cool, clean air, a sky still dense with stars, crickets in the fields, the ordinary world completely undisturbed. Livingston and Kennedy sit down on a low concrete retaining wall just outside the entrance. The adrenaline is metabolizing. Their hands are beginning to shake. A decontamination team moves toward them, sprayers ready. They made it. It is 3 in the morning, and 1 minute, 70 feet below them, the exhaust fans are doing exactly what they were designed to do, pulling the explosive vapor through the duct network toward the surface vents. Somewhere in that duct network, in a junction box, or a relay switch, or a corroded contact point, whose exact location will never be established, because the evidence will be turned to vapor. 2 surfaces connect. A circuit completes. The spark is microscopic. The result is not. The explosion does not travel outward. It travels up. The entire pressure load of the detonation finds the path of least resistance, the silo opening above it. The 740-ton concrete silo door is not blown. It is evicted. It leaves its housing and enters the sky. The shockwave that follows, it emerges from the ground like a fist. The explosion does not sound like a bomb. It sounds like the earth tearing in half. A blinding column of white and orange fire erupts from the ground, effortlessly blowing the massive concrete silo cover from its housing. A shockwave of pure thermal energy instantly expands inside the enclosed concrete cylinder. The pressure has nowhere to go but up. The 740-ton concrete silo door is launched 200 feet into the night sky, turning end over end above the Arkansas pine forest like a piece of cardboard caught in a gust of wind. Below it, the complex simply ceases to exist. The shock wave rolls outward from the silo at supersonic speed. The pine trees surrounding the complex, some of them 60, 70 feet tall, are not knocked down. They are snapped, clean, at the base, as if cut by a blade. The debris field extends for a quarter-mile in every direction. Sitting on the retaining wall, 4 feet from the entrance, Livingston and Kennedy cease to be sitting on a retaining wall. The shock wave physically picks them up and throws them like rag dolls into the darkness. Kennedy is violently blown over 150 feet through the air, his body smashing through a chain-link fence and landing in a pile of twisted steel. Kennedy is found in a tangle of chain-link fencing, his leg bent at an angle legs are not designed to achieve. He is alive. He is conscious enough to identify himself. His lungs are burning from brief chemical exposure, but he is breathing. He is already trying to tell the rescue team that Livingston was on the wall. David Livingston is found under rubble. The rescue team works for 3 hours before they reach him. The concussive pressure of the blast has ruptured the alveolar tissue throughout both lungs. He is breathing minimally. When they extract him, he will not recover. David Livingston, 22 years old, senior airman, United States Air Force, dies from his injuries. The first person outside the military perimeter to understand that something has gone catastrophically wrong is not a general. It is Ruth Snodgrass, a farmer's wife who has lived 3 miles from the installation for 15 years. She is standing at her kitchen window with a cup of coffee when the western sky goes white. Not orange, the way a fire is orange. White. Absolute. The same color as the sun at noon, without warmth, without direction. Just a sourceless blaze that turns the farm into high noon for 2 full seconds before it dies. By dawn, military police have arrived at every house within a 5-mile radius. The officers are polite. They explain, calmly, that there has been a fuel handling incident at the installation. No nuclear material is involved. There is no contamination. There is no danger. Please remain in your homes until further notice. This is not true. Behind the military police barricades, specialized nuclear response teams in radiation suits begin to carefully walk through the smoking debris field. Every time they step over a piece of twisted metal, they hold their breath. They are looking for a dull gray, cone-shaped object about the size of a small car. For agonizing hours, they find nothing but shredded aluminum and burning rubber. Finally, at a drainage ditch, roughly 100 feet from the main gate, a searcher notices the grass is bent at the wrong angle. He stops. He sweeps his Geiger counter. The needle barely moves. Resting in the mud, partially obscured by the high broken grass, is a massive, heavy, gray cone, the W-53 warhead. The end of the world has been declined, not by strategy or heroism, but by the mathematics of safety margins. The W-53 warhead is severely dented and badly bruised, but it is intact. The re-entry casing, designed to survive atmospheric re-entry at thousands of miles per hour, has held together through the explosion, the ejection, the unguided flight, and the impact. The fail-safe mechanisms have functioned exactly as designed. The military quietly loads the battered 9-megaton warhead onto a specialized, heavily armored transport truck. Surrounded by a massive convoy of military police and black vehicles, the bomb is slowly driven away from the small farming community of Damascus, disappearing back into the classified shadow world of the American nuclear arsenal. The smoking pit that was once Launch Complex 374 is filled with concrete and covered with dirt within the month. No marker is placed. No memorial is authorized. The installation does not appear on any publicly accessible map. It simply ceases to exist. erased from the paper record. With the same institutional efficiency the Air Force applies to most things that embarrass it, what cannot be as easily erased are the men. The United States Air Force needs someone to blame for the catastrophic destruction of a nuclear launch facility and the death of senior airman David Livingston. They refuse to admit that the Titan II program is fundamentally flawed, aging, and dangerous to operate. Instead, they point the finger directly at the lowest-ranking men on the ladder. Airman David Powell is pulled into a formal military investigation within days. His security clearance is suspended. He receives an Article 15, a non-judicial punishment that ends his Air Force career without the due process of a court-martial. The investigation frames his decision as an individual act of negligence, a characterization that conveniently does not examine why the authorized torque wrench was routinely unavailable, or why the workaround he used was not unprecedented across multiple Titan II facilities. Sergeant Jeff Kennedy is formally awarded the Airman's Medal for Valor. The citation acknowledges that he voluntarily entered a highly hazardous environment to protect human life and federal property. The ceremony is quiet. There are no news cameras. The medal is real, the recognition genuine, and within 18 months, the Air Force has medically retired him, and he is fighting the Veterans Administration for coverage of the respiratory damage sustained the night he won it. Kennedy's lungs carry the signature of Aerozine 50 exposure. The injury is chronic, progressive, and painful. His leg, shattered when the blast threw him 150 feet, never fully recovers. During the formal investigation, Kennedy testifies honestly. He describes the hours of delay while generals in Omaha requested clarification instead of authorizing immediate action. He states, clearly and on the record, that earlier authorization to activate the exhaust fans would have prevented the explosion entirely, and that David Livingston would still be alive. The Air Force does not charge Kennedy with insubordination. It simply makes the process of leaving easier than the process of staying. Kennedy spends the remainder of his life fighting for medical coverage, for recognition, for an acknowledgement from the institution. He almost died, for that the decisions made above him that night were as responsible for the outcome as the socket that slipped from Powell's hand. He dies at 56, his body worn out 20 years ahead of its time. Today, if you drive north on Highway 65 through Conway County, Arkansas, the land tells you nothing. The farms are the same farms. The fields are the same fields. At a certain point along a gravel road leading off the highway, there is a chain-link fence enclosing a roughly circular patch of ground where the grass has never grown back quite right. There is no sign. There is no monument. Ruth Snodgrass died in 2004. She never received an official explanation from the United States government for what she saw that night. She told her grandchildren when they asked about the white light that it was lightning. The Damascus accident is the story of how the most technically sophisticated military apparatus in human history was undone, not by an adversary, not by a failure of strategy, but by the irreducible human fact of a tired young man in a poorly ventilated concrete hole, making a decision that seemed reasonable at 6:30 on a Wednesday evening. The most powerful weapons ever built by human civilization are not held in check by satellites, by codes, or by treaties. They are held in check by the judgment of exhausted people in the middle of the night. That is the thing we built. That is the thing we live inside. And somewhere, on a quiet night in Arkansas or Kansas or Arizona, there is always another young man with a wrench, standing in the dark, making a calculation about what is and isn't worth the extra 40 minutes.